I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, because we know what their emissions are,
I don't think I need any of that.
their analysis.
Yeah, there it is.
It's for main base load.
Yeah, it provides whatever hospital.
Okay, I think we can start our meeting. So one little announcement I want to make. I believe the meeting's being videoed. Is that right? Because we have a presentation that others were very interested in. So the way it works, that is if it's recorded, the whole meeting's recorded, not just the presentation. So we're all going to be documented in this meeting.
And it makes it more important to use these
Yeah.
so that they can pick up the audio on the recording.
So I'm calling meeting to order, and why don't we do the roll call?
Committee Member Cooper.
Here.
Committee Member Gollum is on his way as trains late. Committee Member Sear.
Here.
Vice Chair Smithies is not available this evening. Committee Member Urhammer.
Here.
Committee Member Way. And Chair Peterson.
Here. Okay. Of course, we always open it for public comment now, but I see we have our presenter, but no one from the public is present, so why don't we move on? We're doing this in a little, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, approval of minutes, my favorite topic. Anybody have, I have no comments on the minutes. Does anybody else?
I move that the minutes be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Thank you, Stephanie, for pointing that out. So we're doing a little bit different. Rather than going to announcements right now, we have a presenter here, Wes Sullins with the U.S. Green Building Council on LEED and California Green Building Code. So I don't know, Jeff, did you want to do a little lead-in on this? Or?
Yeah, if I could, just first of all, to briefly introduce Wes. He is the Director for Building Code Technical Development with the U.S. Green Building Council. And Wes has been a prominent leader in the profession of green building codes for the last 15 years or so, since I've been paying attention to this issue. He was with Stop Waste for a number of years and was involved in the creation of some of the Green Point checklist documents and probably many others that I didn't know that you had an important role in. And we wanted to bring some outside expertise to the city to help inform you how we could better implement what we should be doing. Basically, I think the core question we're posing to Wes is what should the city of Albany do to be a leader in implementing green building programs with some recognition of the size that we have and the kinds of projects that we tend to get. And so we've had a couple conversations with Wes about that, and I think he has a presentation to give you. Just to kind of refresh your memory and context, I think starting about 10, 12 years ago, the city implemented a green building program at the planning stage of projects, and we developed a kind of a hybrid green building checklist from some of the work that Wes did. And initially, I think that made a big difference in some of the projects that we saw. We got people thinking about green building at the beginning of their project. With the passage of time, those practices, green building practices, have been incorporated into the California Building Code and into the profession more generally. And so today I'm not sure that we have a program that really is getting any traction beyond what's in the codes. Having said that, the codes are significantly better, particularly the energy codes. And so I'm not sure exactly what we could be doing. I'm sure Wes will be able to better inform us about that this evening. But we do want to continue to be a leader in the Bay Area in making sure that our projects are as sustainable as possible. So unless you have any upfront questions for me, I think turning it over to Wes would be appropriate for his questions or his presentation and more of your questions.
I just have a framing question for you, which you may be discussing. But there's a question of new building versus retrofit, and in Albany, some years there may be some new building, other years there may not be so much, particularly on the commercial side. So I'm just as a general question, this question of retrofits and how much can we, really ratchet up the degree of energy efficiency for retrofits? Because I suspect, there's a lot of, older construction, a lot of retrofits going on, new kitchens, new bathrooms, et cetera. It's never quite been clear to me how, Title 24 flanges with the, the retrofit market.
Yeah, I can certainly touch on that. Get this taller. The retrofits are something that the codes you don't always trigger. You might just trigger that new part of the building only. So that's a challenge. But I'll cover some of that, and feel free to jump in with more questions too.
I think, I know I have a bunch of things. I don't want to make you have to on the fly adjust. Why don't you do your presentation and then we'll run into that. We'll
Okay.
hit our particular things.
And I assume the presentation will be about 10, 15 minutes, and then you can have me as long as you want for questions. So where did the presentation go? Here we go.
Do we want to adjust the lights?
Okay, is that showing up okay? All right. So thank you for having me here. As Jeffrey mentioned, I remember doing some work on actually this building when it was being retrofit many years ago, right? We had a recommendations report from Stop Waste that I helped write. But now I work at USGBC, which is a national nonprofit organization headquartered in DC. And a lot of the success of the USGBC is attributed to places like Albany and Alameda County and their local leadership on green building. So it's fun to come full circle back. Just a plug, we have a conference coming up. It's a one-day thing, August 1st, if anyone's available. Should be a great day of packed information about these types of topics. So Greener Builder. So I wanted to give a little bit of overview of some of the green building trends I'm seeing. Then we'll drill down into a little bit on what USGBC is up to with our LEED rating system in California, and then kind of open it up more to the policy and discussion. So perhaps this is not a question I need to ask this crowd, but why does building green matter? I think we all know carbon, right? We know these facts, like the buildings use a lot of energy. They contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Their outsized impact for the amount of space they take up. But also, they're responsible for a lot of the waste in this country, the solid waste. Construction waste is more than twice the amount of all municipal solid waste. So that's a big amount that we need to account for. And when in construction, over 10, maybe 15% of all the materials used actually go to waste. And that's primarily because of overruns or ordering more than you need, that type of thing. But construction waste is a big part of that. And the results of all of this is that resource extraction has been doubling and even tripling over the last 20, 30, 40 years. And these impacts of all those minerals, those things we mine out of the earth, they contribute to creating these buildings we all love and enjoy, but they also have big impacts. So I guess my message there is it's not just about the energy, it's also about all the other things that make up your building. And that's something that the U.S. Green Building Council and LEED rating system takes kind of an umbrella approach to it. So some of the trends we're seeing is a focus on zero energy. I'm sure this has come up a lot. Zero energy, all electric buildings, carbon neutral. That's something that's very popular right now. Also, this focusing on the embodied carbon of materials. So not just a building when it's operating and how much energy it's using or not, but also what it took to make those materials. There's an emphasis on performance, kind of to your question of the existing building stock. How can you green that if a lot of it's already built? Well, there's ways to track and report on how buildings are doing in use and getting that data. Climate resilience, on the Bay here, it's an important thing that we're going to have to deal with more and more. Recycling markets are having troubles right now. That's something that's affecting lots of goals at the state and the local level. And then, of course, the state has, as you mentioned, Jeff, some really pretty stellar programming and requirements for all of us to do. So what does that mean for local leadership when the state has kind of come down with these big targets? And another one that's super important for homes especially is that tighter buildings equal the need for better indoor air quality. As we get really super efficient buildings and we wrap them in these advanced materials and they're very airtight or close to it, those things we put in the building matter more than ever. And the other one that's affecting construction, of course, is just the construction boom, the labor shortages, the cost is going up. So that's something that is always on everyone's mind. So at the USGBC, we run the LEED program. If you're familiar with, it's a rating system for buildings. You can earn points, and projects have to first meet some minimum prerequisites, and then they can get points in various categories to get certified. And there's different levels. There's certified, silver, gold, and platinum, kind of being the top tier. And it's had some good traction. We certify over 2 million square feet per day now, which back in those early days when we were doing this work, we just had hundreds of projects. Now it's up to thousands and thousands. So it really has taken off. But LEED as a rating system, and I think this is true for the green building industry, has had to evolve and adapt over time. What was green 20 years ago is different today. And so I'm just showing this slide to show that our rating system has been changing and ratcheting, and we're actually in development of a new phase of the rating system right now. And that's LEED for homes, that's LEED for buildings, commercial buildings, LEED for neighborhoods. We have kind of tools for a bunch of different scales. One I'll highlight just because it just got released is operations and maintenance. This is primarily for commercial buildings, but the focus is this new rating system is on performance, so it's data-driven. It's no longer document all your credits with lots of paperwork. It's show us your performance. Connect to your meters, connect to your water meter, your energy meter, do waste audits, things like that, and track your performance over time, and we certify those now annually. So that's a change that the rating system has undertaken to be more adaptive to the existing building market. And I think this is something we always try to straddle, is what is the market ability to take on these strategies, and what is the urgency of the problem? So we know climate change is the #1 urgent thing. What's the market's ability to take on things like zero carbon and renewables tomorrow? We know that's pretty good, but is that good everywhere? We always have to balance between, one place versus a national or an international rating system. So we're always playing with this tension. And California is a leader in green building and in environmental, of course, things. We've got lots of track record of doing this, many, many years. But the important thing about California, one of the important is that bottom thing, stat, 482 cities. This is a giant economy upon itself. It's got a lot of jurisdictions involved. And so when the state decided to put together a green building code back in 2010, it looked to the rating systems that were out there, and it looked to the strategies that were working in stretch codes, reach codes around the state, and they came up with a set of criteria that you see on the screen. There were indoor air, site, construction, materials, water, energy, and they created a package of measures that are now mandatory in all projects. So if you're pulling a permit, whether it be a new construction or a residential retrofit, you are subject to all those measures now in the state. And there are a basic set of core requirements on those categories. And if the animation was working as a PDF, you would see that pie kind of shrink and overlap with the LEED pie, because there's similarities, but they're still different. LEED allows some white space, if you will, at the top. And so to illustrate that, we've kind of I've got the credit categories are along the bottom there for the LEED or the code, with sites, landscape, water, et cetera. And then there's these sort of code measures that are fundamental requirements now in the state. But there's still the ability for locals to have stretch requirements. Maybe there's stormwater or some energy provisions that are required in a city. And then the LEED rating system provides white space on top of that to go even farther, and a recognition. It's a third-party recognition. So when working well, that overlap minimizes confusion. This is a terrible slide to show at 7 o'clock on a work day, but the idea is we have recently recognized California's leadership with LEED and have put together a package where if you're certifying a building, these prerequisites and credits are essentially automatic because you're building in California. So that was the way that our rating system is realizing the leadership in California. We want to recognize that and get out of the way of projects that are doing good things and encourage them to go farther. Because when working well together, we think this trend of green buildings, not just in California but other places, as the codes kind of ratchet themselves up, the rating system has the ability to adapt on top of that. And I think that's the nugget I wanted to share today, is that we feel like the rating system provides this recognition that's beyond regulatory. It's an outward kind of certification for buildings, for places. But also the code raising allows those rating systems to adapt and go higher over time. So when working together, this relationship can lead to greater outcomes for both the codes and the regulations, but also the rating systems. So it's kind of push-pull, not an either-or. Okay, so as for policy, getting more local now, California's state has some lofty goals. Zero energy residential by this next code cycle is the main goal. Non-residential by 2030. So what that means is when you pull up a project is built and it's new construction, they need to be zero net energy for residential pretty soon, and by 2030, there'll be that same goal for commercial. There's also a little asterisk there, well, in brackets, the state also is trying to find programs for retrofitting half of all commercial buildings to zero energy by 2030. We'll see how we get there. It can be difficult to regulate existing buildings when they're not pulling a permit. The other big driver locally is community choice energy. Most of the region now have an option for that, and that's really providing low carbon alternatives for your consumers, for your residents and businesses. There's also a desire to electrify buildings and vehicles. So we're seeing more encouragement of things like more electric vehicle charging spaces being part of local stretch codes, reach codes. Also kind of looking at all electric buildings as a way to solve some of these climate problems. And there are barriers there at the state. So CalGreen's been in existence for 10 years, and they've been steadily kind of increasing the dials. There's now 65% construction waste as recycling is required for all projects. And there's a basic amount of low-emitting materials and water conservation and energy efficiency that is now required on every project again. So again, how do you show leadership in a place where the state has been kind of putting these down on everyone for a while? So green policies are still important, though. We are seeing that state buildings continue to have some really lofty goals. They're having zero energy goals for the state's portfolio of projects. A lot of those are doing LEED as well. The UC system and the colleges have zero waste goals. They have zero energy goals. They also are using LEED. They're using all types of zero waste certifications, et cetera. And most of the large cities are still using some kind of green building rating system as part of their code, either a LEED or a LEED equivalent. For smaller cities, we are seeing CalGreen tiers as being used in some places, although not as many as maybe the first generation, because as the state keeps ratcheting up the code requirements, we've seen some of the tier jurisdictions drop those over time, or maybe focus on just individual measures instead of a % better than energy code. So I don't know how readable this is, but here's just a snapshot of a few local codes that are around here that have filed with the California Energy Commission. And because when you adopt an energy ordinance that goes above the code, you need to file with the state. And these are the cities that have done so in 2017. There may be some new ones since then, but this is the latest I could find. So City of Fremont, what's interesting on this list is some are what's called efficiency means, targeting some percentage of efficiency above the state requirements. Others are doing more what's called single measures, like cool roofs or PV or lighting or something like that. They're not saying beat energy code by 15%. They're saying do LED lights, put in solar panels, do a cool roof, et cetera. And so there's still a handful of those. There's more than this snapshot shows, but I just wanted to share that. And there's actually a pretty good resource that the energy utilities and PG&E's website has showing some of these REACH codes. And those, the energy utility kind of rebate program, they have helped develop these cost effectiveness studies, and they can help with research on some of these measures. So Berkeley, Brisbane, Fremont, there's more detail here on all these in the report. And I just have a link to it here so you can take a look later. But I think the bottom line is that, there's lots of options available. I would, again, encourage you to look holistically as much as possible. So carbon's important, but so is indoor air quality, so is waste, so is water. And the state goals are there, but there are ways to exceed it. CalGreen is one way. They have tiers that kind of allow these prescripted above-code ratchets, if you will. And there's been some success with that, but there's pros and cons. And then some have used things like LEED or other third-party Greenpoint rated as a way to get improved requirements, but maybe using some of those entities, those nonprofits, as the verification body rather than, say, city staff or building inspectors. So I'm going to pause there. That's a lot to take in, but I'd love to hear any conversation. Questions?
Thank you very much. So I know we have been talking about doing stretch codes or green codes that are specific to Albany. One thing that's come out of our past looking at where we are and where we need to be, and this concept of planning towards net zero by 2050, I think is what Albany's goal is that there's a lot that could be worked in there to incentivize or try to push people towards what that means, rather than just waiting till the last minute and dropping a bunch of things and they have to change rapidly. So I'm wondering if, it seems like all municipalities are kind of struggling with this. And one thing we didn't want to do was just make a bunch of regulations that just hammered people over the head and made them very upset that now they want to do that. You mentioned these other cities that have gone beyond. How are those, how did they help make these come about so people don't either just not do them at all, don't pull a permit, decide not to do the work, or sort of incentivize it in any manner?
Yeah.
Seen any of that?
Well, I'll go back a slide. There's a couple of different ways they've done it. So some is they tie utility incentive programs directly to it. So if there's a cost premium, there's a case that can be made that you can recoup those costs and maybe even get some help paying for it. Those are more the single measure. I think the other big challenge when doing a policy like a time of sale type thing or an energy upgrade program is the trigger point. Is it at time of sale? Is it some date certain? I think we've talked in the past about having a time of sale energy upgrade requirement, and that can be dicey, that can be challenging to get because there's already a lot of things happening at time of sale. If you add this to it, it becomes very confusing and hard to do. So I think Berkeley has a model where they're looking at this home energy score. They have it tied to the time of sale, but there's ways to tie that as a voluntary approach where you encourage a certain number of projects, certain number of buildings per year to get that label, and maybe do it as a voluntary unless some date is reached. So I think in Boulder, Colorado, they had something like this where they said by, I'm getting the dates wrong, but by 2020, everyone shall have upgraded these pieces of equipment in their homes or some subset. And it gave the market time to figure that out. Like either on burnout, you replace it, or if there's a rebate program out there that's incentivizing, maybe you decide to replace it a little early. And you had options as an owner of that building of when you would fulfill that trigger. But the time of sale is definitely, it can be a lightning rod for making it difficult, I guess. Does that help?
Sort
Yeah.
of reflects what we've been saying. Does anybody else have any questions? Or?
I had a question. So is USGBC and LEED, it sounds like it's primarily directed to commercial buildings, is that correct? Or do you also develop codes? I mean, green codes, REACH codes are for residential, but for LEED, that's mainly commercial, correct?
Well, actually, we have residential program as well. We have LEED for Homes, it's called. Doesn't have a lot of traction because there's local programs like Greenpoint rated here. However, the multifamily market, which is where the greatest growth is for residential that we're seeing, there's pretty good traction. So the mid-rise and high-rise multifamily is using LEED a lot, quite a bit. So that's, but mostly on the new construction side. Existing buildings, we do not have an existing building rating system for residences. The operations and maintenance rating system, which is for existing buildings, is applicable to multifamily as well. Yeah, but I think the reality is that, a lot of these requirements and codes are focused more at the commercial multifamily. We also, as a organization, are helping sponsor a model green code for the rest of the country, not for California, called the International Green Code. But that's not so relevant here because California's already ahead, already has one. So we're trying to push at both sides. We're trying to raise the floor with codes and also pull from the top.
So for commercial multifamily, that's interesting because for Albany, there are a lot of renters. They may be in multifamily units or they may be in single-family units, but do you have any thoughts for how, we had talked about retrofits, like there are a lot of existing stock of buildings if you just drive down Solana Avenue. Do you have any thoughts for what other cities have done or what Albany might do? Because there's also this renter agency problem, which has come up a lot as a barrier. So just curious how you guys have seen that, or if you've seen innovative programs in places like Berkeley or, Boulder or other places.
I think Claire probably has some of the best pulse on this locally because of her work with the Alameda County Energy Council, because a lot of cities are struggling with the same thing, Hayward and Fremont and other places. I think some of these policies on this list here, again, focusing on a technology, a solar PV ordinance is real popular because it's visible, you can see it on a building, it's something that has an immediate impact. When the financing is right, it can be cost neutral or offset some of those costs. I think it's a challenge, especially the rental piece. That's something that we have never been able to really crack of how do you. We focus more on the owners. On the rental side, I know also Greenpoint Rated has an existing building rating system that's changed over time because it was such a difficult model. And now it's more of a voluntary, here's some great practices, encourage your tenants to do these, and it's all about tenant education and awareness. So I don't know, that's the hard nut to crack, right? Yeah, it's challenging. But I would say again, the Alameda County Energy Council has some great resources there, and the city of Berkeley, with their home energy score policy that they've got, are looking at ways to replicate that in other cities as well, and that might be a good option. That model is based on a home inspector who comes out and does like an energy asset rating. Seeing some heads nod, so you've heard about it. So
We've
it's
looked into this quite a bit.
Yeah,
Thought of implementing that in Albany, so we're in fact, we're going to talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Anybody have any more questions?
Wes, one of the criticisms of LEED is that you can hunt for points. You don't necessarily get an energy efficient building. There's lots of examples of that. Is that something that USGBC is trying to address with the upcoming version?
It's a great question. Yes, we've been getting all kinds of pressure with this new version to go like zero carbon tomorrow for all platinum buildings, for example. And it's difficult because of our baseline, which has to be a national or even international program now. And some markets, you just cannot do zero energy. There isn't the infrastructure to do it. So we are working on pathways to do that and require some minimum energy performance. We feel like you can already do that as a policy if you set, say, a LEED policy that says you must achieve 10 points in energy, for example. That's a way that we've seen it done. I think San Diego did that in their policy, and others have as well. But yes, we're hearing that criticism. The point chasing piece is, I don't know, I go back and forth on that. Like sometimes that can be a problem, but other times it really maximizes the integrated design that it takes to do a project right. So you don't have to point chase at the end, or if you know which ones you're basically opting to do later on, like buying renewable energy credits or doing some kind of a green cleaning policy or something. So I hear what you're saying. The biggest thing we're hearing, though, is this desire for LEED to better recognize zero energy buildings. And right now we have kind of a bonus points you get if your building is zero energy, but that doesn't seem to be enough from our stakeholders. So just for all your input, we are getting pressured from our industry stakeholders saying LEED needs to go farther on climate, needs to make it the #1 thing. And we're listening. We'll see what happens with that. And I think that reflects probably what you're hearing here locally as well, right? This 2050 goal, for example. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is when we reviewed the Belmont Village, one of the issues we had was that we wanted them to use LEED for new construction, and it was like multifamily, was that what it was? It was something that they were able to get approval to do multifamily instead of new construction, right? Wasn't that the issue?
There were two different checklists that were applicable, could have been applicable, and I think they ended up going with a model that, according to their analysis, and we reviewed it, that was more applicable than the one that we originally
Right.
expected would be used.
But the problem was that was much easier for them to do, and would have been much better for us to be able to require them to do more stringent. So have you seen cities address those kinds of things?
Mostly it's cities getting pressured to allow those easier options in. We've seen some, I think San Francisco has a pretty rigorous ordinance, Oakland does as well, because they knew what they wanted and they set a high threshold. We have seen other states more so there, where they'll have a LEED requirement or something else, and that something else may be self-certified, it may be another program that isn't as rigorous, and then puts us on an uneven playing field, usually, yeah. So I've seen that, but I think around here, that's not so common. I'm wondering what that other program was, if it was,
And it was multifamily, right? No, or was it there was something?
It was a lead check, it was a question
Okay.
of which lead checklist to use.
so there's that one too. Okay, that's a good clarification. I didn't have enough time to put a slide up, but for LEED version 4.1, we're consolidating all our residential rating systems into one, because right now you can go LEED homes, LEED mid-rise, or commercial if you want to kind of modify your project. And what we're finding is most projects are used to the commercial rating system, so they'll just take that path when they can. Maybe that's what happened, or they didn't choose the other one. But we've seen that as an issue and are actually, combining all those into one residential rating system. Yeah,
Great.
interesting.
Okay, well, thanks for kind of trending over our time out, but
Yeah.
anybody have any other questions? I think it's been very informative, so there's obviously a lot we could go on and on about. But again, the idea was to get us thinking some more about green reach codes. Is there, as yet, there's no planned formation and committee or anything like that or subcommittee to take that forward?
Your committee would be the ones to start to work on this.
Okay.
We've talked about, and actually I think we did have for a period of time a joint subcommittee with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we had trouble both logistically organizing that and then taking, what are we going to talk about? And what is what's the starting point? So we thought having Wes here would help kind of get the wheels turning in terms of what do we want to work towards.
But as far as addressing Albany's green reach codes or something that would guide individuals doing either remodeling or new buildings, whatever, towards a more sustainable types construction, this committee is the one that'll first pass on that, is that it?
Yes, I would think so.
So we don't need to partner with the planning folks or the building department or anything like that?
I think logistically, it'd be easier if it stayed within sustainability,
Okay.
and then at some point, probably do want to go to a planning and zoning commission and get their reaction to it, because they may be implementing your policy. But I think it would be easier for you to start on this.
Okay, so it's in our court, we can take the lead on it and start looking at it. Okay. We'll definitely talk about that. Okay, so I think that ends your presentation. Thank you, Wes,
Thank
very
you.
much. We
Thank you
really
all.
appreciate you taking your time.
Sure.
Congratulations on your new job.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're back into sort of our normal announcement communications. 6-1, sustainability events.
Yeah, so just an update on sustainability-related events upcoming in the next month or so. The city is partnering with Alameda County again to host a household hazardous waste and mattress drop-off event at Golden Gate Fields this Sunday. Registration is required. If anyone's interested, you can go to stopwaste.org and look at their one-day collection events. In July, there will be another Bike About Town event and a cleanup event of the Ohlone Greenway, as well as our green, red, white, and blue 4th of July celebration. So those are our green events.
What does that mean?
It means it's a green event.
No, the garbage is always the waste,
Yeah,
waste, sorry, waste
focus on recycling. that kind
No
of
waste
thing.
event?
Yeah.
no waste event, no fireworks either.
Green fireworks.
No fireworks. Okay. Any other sustainability events folks want to bring up? I didn't really look into it. Okay, let's go on.
I had a announcement just for the newly formed Albany Climate Action Coalition. We've met a couple of times. We met this week. Tom and I were there, and there's going to be a push just to try to market and publicize the group, and there's a flyer made, which is a nice, attractive flyer, I think. So kudos to Jessica Day and Eric Larson, who are really championing this. This is kind of an outreach and action committee. It's spawned out of, I think, both the carbon neutral group and then also ACRAT, the Albany Carbon Reduction Action Team. But I think one thing which is really nice is that there's a very handsome website that I just recommend people take a look at. It's Albany Climate Action Coalition, one word, .com, ACAC. So I just wanted to highlight that to people. And there will be some events, some of which Eric will be leading. And I think we would like to really make a push to try to encourage residents to sign up for the 100% renewable option in the near term.
Cool, great.
And also, I think there's a couple of presentations, right, coming up in the next few months that are local, right? One in Kensington.
July 25th and one August 22nd. Jessica and I are leading both of those. So we're both climate action climate reality leaders trained in the Al Gore climate reality organization. So we're doing talk July 25th and talk August 22nd here in Boston.
All right, so we have a little bit of time to publicize. If you wanted to go up and,
If you don't mind speaking at the podium, because we're recording tonight, so that everyone can hear that. They won't hear what you just said. But if you could just announce those dates again.
yeah, since we're doing, why don't you run up and just say, this is part of just events, so, future events?
So Eric Larson with the Albany
Climate.
Climate Action Coalition. Sorry, I'm still getting used to that myself. So we're doing a couple. Jessica Day and I are leading two different talks. One July 25th at the Kensington
Church.
Is it Berkeley United?
I thought I had it. Because I don't have it there. And then August 22nd at the Albany Library. I think it's 7 o'clock p.m. But anyway, Jessica and I are both climate reality trained speakers with the Al Gore organization, the Climate Reality Organization. And so we'll be doing public talks. They're open to anybody. There's no cost. And so we're looking for ways to publicize that. Work on, through Facebook and all that. So I don't know if there's any means that we can get anything through the city, but we'd appreciate that. So should I contact you?
Yeah, we can look into that.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Eric.
I was going to mention if there's time on the agenda, I know it's unscheduled, but I can give you a quick update on the ACAC group with the website. Jessica has done a fantastic job of developing the website. We're almost ready to launch that. So
Yeah,
if there's time
we're
later
going to
on.
have outreach. It's actually 7:03, if you don't mind hanging around.
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to. Yeah.
Is that a good time to have that? Yeah.
Sure.
7:04.
Okay, no other events then? Let me, so next, 6-3 is inventory No, 6-2, climate mitigation and adaptation plan update.
Yeah, so some exciting news. We received 9 proposals for the development of our new CMAP, and we interviewed 4 firms. The interview panel included Claire, myself, committee member Sear, and Chair Peterson, as well as our transportation planner, Justin Freed. All firms were very well qualified, and they had super interesting approaches, but we ultimately selected Cascadia Consulting, who is going to be partnering with Rincon and BAE. We thought that they had the most thoughtful approach. They had a strong focus on implementation. They had deep local context, and they had a very genuine enthusiasm for the project. So we are going to be bringing a contract to council on July 2nd, and we hope to kick off the project in mid-July. Their proposal offered an ambitious timeline wrapping up in February of 2019, but we think that we will more realistically wrap up in late spring or early summer. And yep, that's that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It was very interesting listening to the different or responders to the RFP. Could you elaborate a little on how much this committee will see, or I think staff is going to be mainly updating us on what's going on. It's mainly the consultant will be interacting with staff and that kind of work. So I think it would be good for the committee to kind of get some idea of what what will we be looking forward to hearing about that?
Yeah, correct. So we have a limited budget for outreach, and so we're cutting some corners with them, but I think it'll work really well. They're going to provide updates on the project monthly for the Sustainability Committee, so you'll at least know what's going on, but those updates will be provided by staff, and then they'll also provide us some toolkits for outreach, both to the Sustainability Committee as well as other committees and commissions that are relevant to the CAP. And so we'll probably be coming monthly both with an update for you and also sort of questions to engage you and get your feedback on throughout the process. And then we may use this committee meeting as a venue for a public workshop or a council work session. We haven't decided exactly what that looks like yet, but there will be opportunities for larger public engagement as well. And of course, you will all be welcome in that process.
Okay, great. Okay, anything more on our climate mitigation adaptation plan? It's nice to see that moving ahead. So I think a lot of us have realized that we can really publicize next steps on CAP. This is sort of the CAP 2.0. We really need to have this work done. So it's good they're starting up and moving along. 6-3 East Bay Community Energy Update.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, in May, the council approved enrolling all residential customers in the Brilliant 100% carbon-free option. So Albany and Hayward have enrolling commercial and residential customers in that, and then Piedmont is also enrolling their residential customers in the Brilliant 100. So those are the 3 cities. And right now, we're kind of toward the end of June. So our commercial customers have been enrolled this month, depending on when their meter read date is. So I haven't heard anything about that. So I guess that's good news. So we'll pretty soon probably have some data on opt-outs and opt-downs and that kind of thing, but nothing so far. And then November is the launch date for residential, except for solar customers, which will be later on.
Can you explain that?
Yes, so the solar customers, I think they're enrolling at their true update. So for solar customers, they have this true update that's based on the year. So their enrollment is a little different.
Yeah, they're under sort of a different agreement with PG&E, so it wasn't as easy just to shift them over. Okay, that sounds great. Nice to know Albany is definitely in the lead on that with Hayward, of all places. That's great. Any other comments on?
What did Berkeley decide to do?
I'm not sure that Berkeley brought the question to their council. They were involved in the study that Tom Kelly was doing, and so they were pretty interested for a while, but I'm not sure if they ended up bringing it to council. There were concerns in other cities about equity issues related to opting up to what people said was a more expensive option than the default Bright Choice option, but it's at parity with PG&E, so we didn't have the same kind of concern here.
So that means if they're just going to go with whatever the default is by not having a,
Yes, I think all the other cities are going with the default product.
Yeah.
Tom Kelly's study related to 100% renewable is concluding, and he'd like to come next month to share some of the results from that study as well.
Okay, that'd be great, yeah. Okay, moving on, 6-4, fuel switching pilot program. Not quite sure what that was about.
So East Bay Energy Watch is conducting a heat pump water heater installation project at 10 households throughout Alameda and Contra Costa counties. They will be replacing existing gas water heaters with Energy Star heat pump water heaters and will provide technical assistance and incentives to cover 50 to 100% of installation costs, which depends on income levels. The pilot project will evaluate the barriers to heat pump water heater adoption and customer satisfaction with the project, and results will be available at the end of this year. That's all we know. I'm not entirely sure of the application process. I think that they've already chosen the 10 homes, is my understanding.
We were not engaged in the application process. I apologize.
So I think this is on here because it's good to know that there is at least some kind of program starting people looking at, seems like one of the fuel switching low-hanging fruit is water heaters, which tend to wear out after a while, and rather than putting in that instantaneous gas, which seems to be what everybody wants right now, you could put in this more fuel switching, energy efficient method. So I think this is something we should, I'm not sure how we do it, but if we could look into how could we get a program in Albany for that? Because I think we would gain a lot in getting people thinking about fuel switching on that.
Yeah, the East Bay Energy Watch program that is funding this pilot is sort of an initial pilot, but many of the cities are very interested in shifting some of the funding. This is funding from PG&E for energy efficiency, shifting some of that funding into a larger project like this. So this is kind of the first step, and the hope is maybe we could have a regional program that could be administered regionally, which would be really great. Another update on fuel switching, the EBCE's local development business plan is up for, they have a draft that's up for review. I can send you a link. I think I sent you a link a month ago or so, but there's different pieces of it. And there is a piece that is related to electrification that's quite interesting that Stop Waste has developed some comments on. But in general, it's really great that our CCA is going to be focused on programming that promotes electrification too.
so is EBCE going to subsidize any of the fuel switching?
One of the one piece that I understand from them is that they are actually going to enroll, and this I don't quite understand it. They're planning to enroll a small percentage of their customers in natural gas. So they will actually be the provider of natural gas, and then they're taxing the natural gas and using that to then or using some sort of fee on the natural gas to provide incentives for fuel switching. So it's sort of like they would enroll people in natural gas and then unenroll them over time. I can't quite grasp it. I haven't read it. I'm saying this third hand, but my understanding is they're kind of trying to do some sort of innovative pilot to try to see if it's successful to help people fuel switch. And then if it is, they would roll it out to the whole county, I assume.
And are they focusing on a particular aspect? Is it heating and water?
I'm not sure. I think that they were focusing on everything related to fuel switching, but I can't say for sure. And I'll look up that link and send it to you.
Thanks.
Okay. this may come up a little bit later with some idea on fuel switching. I came across a person who does audits, and they have kind of an interesting follow-on that says, here's what you can do if you want to go net zero. So anyway, that we might come up to that when we start talking about some of the next subjects, especially the energy efficiency subcommittee update. So actually moving on, that's it for this number 6 items. So can we move on to 7.1, energy efficiency subcommittee update? That sound good? I think that's Max and Stephanie, right?
You probably need to also check and see if the public has any feedback.
Oh, well, I'm having a nice little technical problem where I have my agenda on my thing and it's not coming up, so I'm using the one we went over in our meeting, but I guess we changed
Yeah,
it.
that's changed.
So if I can look at stuff.
Yeah, I think there's an extra on the dais too.
Oh, we've switched those around. Okay. Yeah, well, at the end, since we're at the end of, oh, thank you. Since we're at the end of 6, if there was any public comment on any of what we've talked about, we could, should I initiate that? Someone mentioned public comment, so I'm assuming we do it at the end of each one, or no?
The end of each item, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so no. So moving on to discussion possible action on matters related to the following. Greenhouse gas inventory contract. So I think there's a little background, and then there's some also discussion I think we need around it.
Yeah, it's mostly just an update. There is a memo update attached to your agenda, but I'll go over it briefly. As you all are keenly aware, we've been struggling with data access issues and methodology issues for many years. And many other cities have been experiencing the same concerns. And so Stop Waste actually, working with East Bay Energy Watch on a East Bay kind of region-wide Alameda County, Contra Costa County partnership, to address some of these issues, because what's happened is a lot of sustainability staff have been focusing on greenhouse gas inventories and getting really fed up with it, and then not really being able to move the needle or make progress on the implementation side. And Stop Waste really wants to take over some of that burden from them so that they can focus more on the implementation. So we're really excited to work with Stop Waste. They have their consultants. They've granted an award to PlaceWorks to develop a tool for calculating inventories that's going to be a lot more user-friendly and prettier than the Seek ClearPath tool that we have been using, which is quite clunky. So they have a contract with them to create this tool and then to input 2017 data for all the cities. And then there are add-on services. We could pay them more to add in additional years and also present the inventory if we have room in our own budget to work with them on that. We're really excited to work with them because they are going to standardize the inventory methodologies, which we've had a lot of struggles with, as have other cities. And so we're going to look to them as experts to standardize and do a workaround for the fact that we can't get any commercial or industrial data, which is not really going to, so they're not going to solve these problems, but they are going to come up with a workaround that other cities are going to be employing as well. So it's not going to solve everything, but I think it will be as reliable as we can have for an inventory. And then I was speaking with Mia Kitahara of Stop Waste yesterday about this approach, and she said the reason Stop Waste wants to do this is because they also want cities to start focusing on other metrics. And so that's in our new climate action plan, is to determine other metrics that can help us measure success and help us communicate that and tell a story to the community about what we're doing and what we can do and how to get there. And so they're trying to shift sort of, the inventory is important, but they're also trying to shift some of that messaging to focus on something else too. So that's our update, and we'll have we're hoping by this fall we'll have an update for you on our 2017 data. which won't include this biggest piece, which is the impact that enrolling EBCE customers will have. We won't see that for many years, and we may never see the commercial impact. But we can work with PlaceWorks to see if we can, have some sort of forecast on that impact as well.
Yeah, okay, so I know this is a real important issue for all of us here on the Sustainability Committee, and we've juggled around a lot with what kind of information can we put forward. So the city's position now is that we're going to wait for this PlaceWorks unified, all municipalities are equivalent in order to come up with what the 2017 is. And then as far as publicizing earlier, we would need to go back and have PlaceWorks shove in to their tool past data, and then that would come up with a unified, regularized inventory that then we could use that.
I think that's the best approach. I think other cities have had the same issues we have, and they've been really hesitant to publicize them because they really can't rely on the data. We'll have to see, because again, like I said, they're still not going to have access to the PG&E data we really need. So I can't speak before having them figure out all these things, but I think it's best to wait before we publicize something that, so that we have something we're more confident in.
Okay. They'll have access to the same, they won't get additional data. They're just going to have access to the same data we've always had. Is that it? And they're just standardizing how everyone's looking at it.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Anybody have any comments on that, or?
I guess I just had a few questions on the EBCE. So I've just been looking at this question just based on the ACAC meeting we had yesterday in terms of the impact of the 100% zero carbon enrollment, default enrollment for residential and commercial. So I'm assuming that would occur by 2020. I mean, it should be happening earlier. But one question that was raised there was, does it mean that everyone literally is on 100% zero carbon? In other words, like the AUSD, the schools, because I'm just wondering, for these calculations, which are, kind of preliminary maybe because we're looking at other more official inventories, but is that the right assumption to make?
The rate is,
It's
you're
literally
asking.
everybody? Yeah, because that's a huge chunk of emissions if we zero all electricity use, right? So, but I'm just curious, does it mean that AUSD, schools, and, like care customers, everybody, is that correct? Because it just seems like that's pretty broad and sweeping. And I wasn't sure.
That's what we have to wait to learn more from EBC about opt-outs. They can't give us specific information about certain agencies or residents that have opted out, but once they have, due to privacy rules, but once they have enough, they can give us aggregated data. And I don't know exactly what form that will come in, but I have an assumption that we can get a sense of the percentage of our total load that's within Bright Choice and Brilliant 100, and as well as the 100% renewable option. And hopefully we can get that for commercial soon, and for residential after it launches.
Wouldn't USD, that would have to be board action, right? The school board would have to vote to opt out.
I believe so.
Right, it couldn't just be like the superintendent deciding that they're going to opt out. They'd have to vote on that, wouldn't they? Or is power supply not something that the board looks at, the school board looks at? Do you know?
I don't know offhand. There's probably some administrative policy that they've established that gives the superintendent authority one way or the other.
That sounds like a good opportunity for some outreach to talk to ASUD and let them know, hey, please hold to this. But as an entity in Albany, they will default. Actually, I don't even know where they get their power from, but I assume it's from PG&E, and they'll just default to the 100%.
Unless they're
Brilliant.
direct access, they will default
Yeah,
to EBCE unless they opt out.
yeah.
But they're an institution, and institutions are part of the rollout in June, so I haven't
Yeah,
heard anything
okay.
either way.
Well, it sounds like we should at least, someone should touch bases with them and do that.
On this topic, is there going to be anything that's presented to us in terms of their methodology, so that's something we can discuss and review?
I believe they're making, I believe through their contract directly with Stop Waste, they'll be making the determinations about methodology. So I'm not sure if there's an opportunity to provide input on that, even by staff. But certainly, once it's complete, we'll work with them to either have them give a presentation directly, or staff will gain an understanding of what their methodology was to present to the committee.
I think that'd be a good idea. Maybe have them come and, so would that be Stop Waste then would do that, or?
It would be, we would have to contract directly with PlaceWorks.
Oh, okay.
It would be an add-on service to their contract for them to come here.
And what's the ETA for when this, we'll actually get the results of this?
I think that they're hoping to be done by November or December of this year.
Okay. Well, I know we're hoping to get as much, current info out as possible to people, but it seems like the concept now is to wait, have this more standardized, let people know, but still move ahead. We still have a target, we're still shooting for it, and that's what our efforts are behind right now. Okay, so moving on, 7-2, Energy Efficiency Subcommittee update. I think that's you and Max, right? Well, this is sort of the, looking at the building energy score and that kind of thing. I don't know if we have anything more to report on that.
Stephanie and I didn't meet, actually. We were both out of town last week, I believe. So it was a bit of a crunch recently. I guess one just point of discussion that I might raise that we didn't mention or we didn't talk about last time is PACE. So I just spoke very briefly to a colleague at LBL, and he mentioned that PACE has had some traction, which surprised me a bit because I didn't know it had a lot of traction. And I asked him where was that, and he said in California, in some communities for some measures. So I know that we've had a PACE presentation here in the past, or maybe more than one, but I mean, there were concerns like the financing rate didn't seem super attractive, and I believe that the uptake rate wasn't super high either, but I was just curious, Claire, and from staff's standpoint, do you guys see any potential there, or is it still pretty difficult to, have we had uptake for PACE for either, energy efficiency upgrades or PV?
I don't have data from PACE. We've paused on promoting it as a program because of a lot of issues, sort of predatory lending issues. But there have been some new regulations, I think, where things are kind of becoming more standardized. So we're waiting to hear more before we push the program. But I think it's moving in a good direction to the point where we could maybe do that in the future. Also, interest rates have been very high, so we've been hesitant to recommend that to people.
Because depending on how staff views that particular program, since electricity is going zero carbon, we still have natural gas and electrification is hard. So there's still a role for energy efficiency retrofits, and not to say solar PV perhaps also. But it is something that ACAC could also add. I mean, we discussed that also yesterday in terms of potential points of outreach. So that was one item. The other update was just that I met, and I think Nick also spoke to, or at least communicated with, a local contact, North Lennox, I'm not sure.
Lennox or something?
Yeah,
I
North
forget the
Lennox,
name of his company.
But he is I guess an independent consultant who has done a lot of energy audits in the East Bay, I think 100, including a few homes in Albany, including Nick's relative's
place,
home, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
But he was showing me, I met with him for coffee a few weekends ago, and he was quite enthusiastic about energy audits and potentially, like BISA-like programs to really try to inform customers and consumers for future energy costs. So he was citing the example of energy passports in Europe and Germany. So it was a slightly different angle, perhaps, or maybe just revisiting an angle that we've talked about. But he seemed to have a good data set. He also seemed to have some cost. Remember, I was kind of estimating the cost of energy retrofits in our last meeting. He also seemed to have his own set of cost estimates for things like heat pumps and energy efficiency. So I think both Nick and I felt that he could be an interesting guest to our committee. And he also sent out a presentation
Yeah, he
last
has,
week, which I haven't really had a
it's
chance
very
to review.
thorough. I
yet.
mean, he has a very comprehensive presentation of his data and of his methodology, and also this follow-on. He has a certain type of, he supplements the energy audit with, I forget what he has a certain name for it, a green report or something that said, well, here are the measures you could take to achieve net zero carbon production. And, it would talk about like taking the water heater and doing a electric heat pump water heater, or if you converted to a electric heat pump heating, cooling system. Some of these, of course, were quite expensive, but at least it gave you the idea of what it would take if you wanted to get to that level of performance in your home. So he seemed very energetic and motivated in doing these, presenting this type of information. So I can forward that on to you. You can take a look at it, and we can see. One thing I want to get back to is, I think this all spins out of this, our own little pilot project where we were talking about do we or do we not, create a BEDO. And I think at this point, we've reached a position where we want to do something more focused. We're not sure if it's a BEDO, but there must be some way to encourage people to make these eventual long-term changes to net zero. So it's gotten to be at least that's how I see it. It's gotten more vague. Instead of just being, here's an ordinance, you must get an energy audit, you'll get this type of energy audit, and then the city gets that information and sort of tracks it. No mandatory requirements for upgrades or anything. But I think what came out of the pilot project was we were a little startled at first how wide-ranging all the scores were, and then how little the suggested improvements changed the score. And on top of it, hearing that I think the city of Berkeley now is actually advising people don't do what's recommended because we're still looking at this, it could go against fuel switching and all that. So this whole thing kind of unraveled a lot, at least that's my take. And I don't know if anybody else has any comments on that, but I think that's still what this topic is that the Energy Efficiency Subcommittee was wrestling with what do we do in Albany to encourage energy efficiency in buildings. So I think we're still kind of stuck there.
I do have one update, even though Max and I haven't had a chance to talk. What I have been spending my time on is preparing for the August summer study of the American Council on Energy Efficient Economy, where I'm leading a panel on resilient, sustainable communities. So a lot of the work that's being presented there is very relevant to here. And I think a couple ideas to consider, and I can share more info once the papers are finalized. But when we're looking at energy efficiency improvements on their own, some things might not seem to be like net benefit or cost effective. But when you look at how does that contribute to other goals like resiliency, right, or other health goals, then the picture can change. There's also a paper on PACE financing in that panel. There's a paper that also addresses the inventory challenges So I'm actually glad to see that Stop Waste is helping out Alameda County, and it's a bigger issue for, other cities beyond the county as well. But the big things I've seen are about looking at these multi-benefit analyses of energy efficiency improvements, renewable energy fuel switching. And that, I think, could be a good tack for us to take.
It's interesting because in our interviews for the CAP 2.0, there was a lot of conversation about co-benefits as well, and how we determine strategies maybe based on which have co-benefits that could be more politically feasible and also just more beneficial holistically to the community.
So again, I guess I'm kind of asking Stephanie and Max if you guys want to continue to pursue this in the context of energy efficiency. And I mean, we still have this, I think it all comes back to when we looked at the CAP data, and we have this section that's sort of building energy, and a natural thing to think is, well, let's make it more efficient so it uses less energy. But I think we've completely rethought that, and maybe if you guys could pull it together and kind of provide, if you're interested, provide some direction on next step. I think we've kind of put the BETO thing to bed, I think, although I'm not sure. But maybe that's still an option. It seems like it needs a lot of thought, and we're not going to do it right now, but is that something you'd be interested in? Or?
Yeah, I think it is worthwhile to take all those ideas and turn them into some specific recommendations that could be pursued.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, I would just add to that, just based on our past discussion here, I think there is the question of the cost benefit of retrofits, which can be expensive and very invasive, versus the costs of heat pump water heating or heat pumps in general, perhaps with or without solar on your rooftop, and then pace, just to the extent that we can get updated information. I think the colleague at the lab also mentioned the predatory concern for some, but I'm sure that there's some who are perhaps not predatory. But then also Peggy had also asked, as I think I mentioned last time, just this notion of block retrofits, or more just innovative.
Working as a community.
Yeah, innovative approaches, which could be stymied by this kind of this holdup in Berkeley, potentially, but I think that's still an interesting concept to think about or to consider. Maybe, we could ask North Lennox about that. So those are some thoughts. But I think for this question of, if people want to do something, what should they do? Should they do a retrofit? Should they get a heat pump water heater? Should they get an EV? I think it goes to that question of what could make sense to do and what is doable today, because there are a lot of possible things to do if you want to spend up front, but it's not so clear what the best thing to do is.
And I think maybe another way to rephrase the question is, I keep thinking about the presentation that the Stop Waste person gave us that said everyone's struggling with this, but eventually you have to get to net zero. And I think there's something between energy efficiency and fuel switching that needs to be ironed out. Like you're saying, maybe you can't make your house the greatest energy efficient thing, but you could change it, and then with some solar, maybe you're not as efficient as you could be, but you're not producing carbon. So someone needs to kind of pull those strategies together, because that's what we really want to advise on, I think.
I'm also interested in what the impact of the EBCE has on this. If we're not, obviously fuel switching will help, but are residents going to be less likely to do energy efficiency projects if what their understanding is that they're getting carbon-free electricity? So why do anything?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. If they're not as efficient, but the problem is they're still using gas. So if they fuel switch, they may be a bit more concerned, because then all their energy use, which will be way more expensive.
Right.
So then it'll probably become
I'm talking about, apart from fuel switching, is it a disincentive for people to invest in anything that makes, like changing to LED light bulbs? Because why would you need to do that? Because you're carbon free, and maybe your PG&E bill would be, or not, your EBCE bill might be lower, but I'm curious whether any of that stuff comes up in the panel discussion that you're talking about, is the impact of the community choice on some of these initiatives.
Yeah, that's a big topic. There's actually a separate panel really focusing on the future utilities, CCAs, what effect that has. I don't have an immediate answer.
I kind of get the gist you're saying, but boy, I wish we had that problem instead of all the carbon going in the atmosphere problem. Because the problem is people aren't using energy efficiently. It's sustainably produced. They're just not using it efficiently. That would be a great problem to have. But, so I think what will happen is when you do the fuel shift, people will all of a sudden go, oh my God, I should have stayed with gas because it was cheaper, And so they'll want to be more efficient in that sense. It'll be more pocketbook-driven thing. But I still think the fuel switching is going to be a big hurdle. Any other comments on that, or can we move on, Darren? Let's move on. So thank you, Max and Stephanie, for, feel free to give me a call if you want my thoughts on that too, because I've got a lot of thoughts on it. Okay, 7-3, review of staff analysis of energy program priorities. I think this is something we've kept on. We just
Yeah, I'm not sure how relevant it is, because I think it's sort of relevant to your conversation that you just concluded. So I'll just see if there's anything is that okay if I?
Yeah, well, if we have that matrix, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I can pull that up.
Chelsea's matrix.
Let's see. So yeah, this was a conversation that we were going to have in April, and then after the results of the home energy score pilot, we decided to pause, and so we may still be on pause indefinitely. But we did look at, this is kind of interesting, for your edification. So there's existing program offerings in Alameda County, or in the East Bay Energy Watch locations, including, I think there's a program list that we attached to your agenda back in April, with a lot of offerings. There's the $250 rebates from the home energy score assessments, the Energy Advisor Program, no cost weatherization and energy efficiency appliances, and education for low-income residents, free commercial audits and rebates, as well as more offerings from EBCE. And if you want more details, I can send you that link again from our April meeting, but there's a long list of current program offerings for Albany residents and businesses. But from that list, we identified some program gaps, outreach regarding these existing programs, because I think that people really aren't aware that these programs exist, especially those low-income residents who have access to many of these programs that could be very helpful for lowering utility bills. And you're already set up to do a lot of that with your ACAC group, so that might be a good option. Assistance with determining viable upgrades and financing, the issue about landlords not being incentivized to upgrade properties, that split incentive issue that keeps coming up both here, and our council is concerned about that issue too. So that's something that we still need to dive into. And then as we learn, property owners with information, such as a home energy score, don't always do upgrades to properties anyway. So eventually we'll have to address that, but there may still be some low-hanging fruit. This is, Nick, was this what you were talking about, the matrix?
I don't remember being a pros and cons. I was just thinking of, we had a priorities matrix that just sort of said how sort of arrange things in a certain way. I was
yeah, I think that's in the memo.
Yeah.
This is maybe just condensed for a slide, but some some options for things the committee could look into, which you've really already done, I think, outreach, time of sale assessments, possible upgrades, or we'd also talked about partnering with Bayren for a voluntary assessment program. I don't need to dive into this deeply unless anyone wants to.
No, I
We
think
can
we,
move on.
I kind of feel we went over that.
Okay.
We were talking about the energy
Right,
efficiency issues.
right.
So,
Just a reminder that the Berkeley voluntary program, their Me Too program, was pretty successful when they paired assessments with incentives for upgrades. So something to just think about. That was pretty successful. They had a big grant from the DOE, but
Can we get that?
Was the funding they had, was that the primary source?
I'm not sure.
I think one comment to make on this one, because I am familiar with this one from the city of Berkeley, is that I think this 22% reduction in natural gas usage is modeled and not actual. So the actual was lower. And
good
so
point.
that may be improved now, but there was some questions on that, so.
So these numbers may be inflated.
Well, just that particular one, I just remembered there was just that comment in the report, which I couldn't find, so I'm glad you dug it out. Yeah.
so doing something similar like this and getting that kind of funding is no longer an option, I gather.
We haven't looked into it.
Oh, okay. Well,
I think our recommendations, this is back from April, and you've discussed since then, but one of our recommendations is to promote the new and existing energy efficiency programs, perhaps through a group like ACAC, and then also work with the community and our consultants to develop energy policy priorities as part of the new climate action plan. We can continue to have this conversation here now, but there's going to be an opportunity in the next few months to really engage the community on some of these issues and think about long-term solutions. So there's the what do we do in the short term in the next year as we're planning, and then I think a lot of the long-term things can wait for that process.
I have a question, a couple of comments. And thank you for the memo, it's very helpful and a nice overview. There's a reference to an increase in utility users tax to provide revenue, and then a reference to taxing based on carbon intensity could promote fuel switching, but it's not currently allowed by PG&E. Is that related to the billing issue with PG&E, or is that a policy consideration?
That's the billing issue with PG&E, because the city of Arcata was actually able to get a new billing system for $850,000, I think, to change
Able
the,
or willing to license it to us, for example?
what?
Arcata's not either able or willing to license it to us.
No, I think, my understanding is that we'd have to pay PG&E directly. But that's an issue that Preston Jordan brought up several years ago, and council passed a resolution in sort of recommending, or I think asking PG&E to allow cities to do this. And he has been successful in working with other cities in the nearby area, I believe Berkeley, Emeryville, and maybe some others in Alameda County. And people really like the idea of being able to tax based on carbon intensity. And so there is some momentum for that. I think it ultimately has to come from the CPUC, so I'm not sure how feasible it is, but it may be possible in the future.
I was just going to say, to the extent maybe some of the East Bay cities are kind of encouraging the CPUC to the extent that has any influence.
Yeah.
So two comments. The first is really more for the council, but I'll say it anyway. I was really intrigued by the reference to Boulder's sustainability program, because if you look at what they do, their population relative to Albany size, if you just kind of scale it, because Boulder's a bigger city, if Albany in our budget was doing what Boulder is doing, we would have 2 FTE staff dedicated to this, plus our fellow, and we'd have something like $500,000 a year in expenditures, which is not the current situation. And then my other comment is, I think that this whole discussion, and I don't have an opinion, but it's just a question that kind of occurs to me, and I think we've touched on this before, and it's really the idea of, there's so much to do here, and if we're trying to kind of be effective, it's the dilemma of, do we try to do a lot of things, or do you try maybe sort of say, well, let's focus on 1 or 2 things that can be most impactful and not worry about trying to do everything at one time. And so I thought the memo kind of prompted into the question for me whether, maybe fuel switching is that one item we should really focus on and kind of try to go deep on, and maybe not try to spread ourselves over a bunch of different areas. So I frame that more as a question than I have a definitive opinion, but it's a question I'm asking myself.
That's a great question, and it's a question that's going to keep coming up during the CAP 2.0 planning process. We're really talking about having a few measures, possibly going deep in those measures, something that's really, implementable by Albany's small staff. And so I think that's a great conversation to have now and continue to have.
Yeah, and I think that was a theme across the interviews, or at least with more than one of the proposals, was have fewer measures in your CAP, like focus so that they're implementable. And even in our energy efficiency or CAP 2.0 subcommittee, we had also, I think we're on the same page of focus, pick just a couple big things and don't worry about trying to cover everything. So fuel switching is definitely a big one, particularly heat pumps.
So just to comment on that one, I would say that solar PV and electric vehicles, they can cost more upfront, but there's a lower operating cost. Whereas heat pumps in general cost more upfront and there's a higher operating cost. So in terms of the basic economics, one could make an argument that electric vehicles or vehicle, alternatives are more favorable, but that's just, that isn't to say it's easier to get people to do that. But, I think the electrification is very difficult because contractors don't really know, may not even know. So, it would be not just an education for the community, but it would be, how do we outreach to a larger community? So.
I mean, there's less expensive things too, like switching your gas dryer to an electric, which also is not as expensive as doing like a heat pump. But what I was interested in hearing in terms of the funding is, what about federal and state grants that we could apply for that could fund something like this that, since the DOE came up in an earlier slide?
We can certainly look into that.
I think that would be good to hear back from staff about what kinds of grant programs are available.
Yeah, there have been some in the past that we haven't applied to. One of the concerns is most of them, like the CEC grants, are really focused on communities that have disadvantaged communities in them. And so we lose a lot of points. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible, and we should definitely look into it.
And I mean, maybe even, DOE is looking for model cities to test things out on, that kind of thing. Since we're small, we may be more attractive than, like a 100,000 population city.
Yeah, that's a good point, but maybe that's something, do you know about that? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of studies and whatever, but I don't know if they're doing citywide kind of approaches. And it seemed like Berkeley tapped into some of that. With
Yeah, I
theirs.
think that there are city wide programs for transportation, like fleets, like San Francisco, for example, has some programs there, I believe. Fueling stations, but I'm not as familiar with those types of things for energy efficiency, but that's not to say that there aren't.
Mhm.
I think one just other comment, Nick, is we do have this energy efficiency subcommittee, which might be restyled fuel switching if we want to focus it down, perhaps. But we should probably consider a transportation subcommittee if we don't have that, just because that's the other big one. Clean electricity and transportation kind of are, pair like heat pump and clean electricity. So that's a larger source, I think.
Yeah, those were,
But
well,
they're both very large.
yeah, those were actually, that's why we're focused on the two ones we're getting some sort of efficiency, which could be fuel switching or energy efficiency. I think those two need to be worked out together. And then, yeah, I like the idea if someone does want to take the lead on a transportation, which could be also active transportation and anything non-gas powered. So that way, even maybe encouraging, stay-at-home working, that kind of thing. So if anyone has an interest in that, let me know. Having people looking at that in more detail and coming back and reporting would be great. Anyone interested in getting into a alternative, a more sustainable method of transportation as a focus, subcommittee focus?
What in your mind, what would that look like?
In my mind, I guess ways of encouraging more active transportation, methods for people to switch from driving gas-fueled cars to electric cars. What kind of supportive infrastructure would be there for that? I don't know. I mean, it's that big wedge of the pie, transportation. How do we make it smaller for generating carbon? Is there some activity this group could be promoting or looking into to do that? I guess that's how I would phrase it.
Yeah, I'm loosely part of a Bay Area climate practitioners group looking at the full range of transportation decarbonization. So I'm losing track of subcommittees, but we had a CAP 2.0 subcommittee, which kind of covers all of those. I'm happy to, I think I only have time for one subcommittee.
That could be an interesting suggestion. Maybe it's just reforming that subcommittee and bringing you back, Nick, if you have time, because that had been our CAP 2.0 committee, but it seems like, yeah, I'm in the same boat, clearly, as Stephanie.
Yeah.
I'm interested, but, yeah, I probably can't support two.
What if we have that as part of the CAP 2.0 discussion? Because that's going to come up then, and, there, in my mind, there's challenges to addressing this, because if we're talking about transportation within city limits, I would bet a lot of that is generated by people driving their kids to school. And so, right, because it's people, it's just miles driven within the city, not like me commuting to Sacramento or something like that. It's only the miles. And so if we're really going to reduce that, in my mind, that's a bigger issue with the schools, the amount of people you see driving their kids to school.
When you see the traffic around schools every morning, yeah, I tend to agree. So I think that, there is a little thing that could be approached there. Yeah, that's interesting with the CAP 2.0. I think all three of us were on that. Then it went into sort of the building efficiency issue and mutated, and it's going to have the same people being on the same committee. So I'm going to wait for someone who isn't on a committee to maybe take that one, and we'll move it forward. You can always call me, let me know. I'll get the word out. So you don't need to be on more subcommittees.
Right, no, but I would encourage, I don't like having a subcommittee only focused on one particular strategy. I think it's better to be looking holistically at the goal and be able to talk about any approach that gets us there.
Well-
So that's why I'd be happy to be on the CAP 2.0 subcommittee.
Yeah, I get a little worried about having one committee that's looking at everything. And then, the same people are on the same committee all the time. So anyway, I think it's a great idea. If someone wants to take the ball and run with that, I like what Tom was saying about school traffic. There's all sorts of traffic. I think we could look at it as a community and see if we can mitigate it. Anyway.
Just on the school traffic, I think that had been the case, but I think the new method that Claire Fanny presented take into account more of the share of trips which are going out of the city, like if you're going to Oakland or Sacramento. So that's why the transportation piece of the pie really increased dramatically. So it is both, I think, now. It's really so I just think of it as like the vehicle, if we can change the vehicles or, or the alternative modes, so, because it could help address both of those, both in the city and then kind of within the Bay Area at least.
Yeah, I actually wasn't talking about the CAP 2.0 subcommittee addressing this. What I was talking about was when we're discussing the CAP, because we're also going to be prioritizing where our focus should be. I don't think we should have 10 subcommittees. I think we need to, figure out what has the biggest impact and focus on those kinds of things.
Okay, well, we're kind of getting into our last 20 minutes here. Any more comments on that? I think that, so are we keeping this on the agenda?
You need to make sure you open it up to public comment.
Yeah, I will. But on this particular 7-3, we still have 7-4. So we're going to keep that on here? Is that what I'm hearing? It seemed to be a
What would you
very
like to do?
broad category. Well, I think we still have this overall, we have this kind of open. We were looking at certain targeted efforts. One was to encourage people to improve the energy efficiency of their homes. And that seems to have now taken on, well, better consider fuel switching too. So that's a lot to look at. Then we had another big segment, which was transportation. And, if we have subcommittees focusing on that and coming up with more detailed looks at that and bringing that back and reporting, we could have that. I think that was a great suggestion. Does anyone agree or no?
What's your
I'm
question?
getting a lot of confused looks.
What are you asking?
I'm not clear on which item.
Okay, okay. So let's just close this issue. I think we beat it to death. No one's interested in pursuing the transportation options in a subcommittee, so we'll just let them fall where they may. So I still have a 7 item. My understanding is when I get to the end of all the 7s, I ask for public input
You ask for a public comment on every item.
on every item. Okay, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever done that. So any public comment on item 7.3? Thank you, Eric.
I enjoyed the discussion. I liked Ron's comments about, and echoed by Tom, I think, of making sure that you evaluate all the different options and take the few that make the most impact and really pursue those. My gut says transportation is got to be one of the biggest parts of this. And so I'm a little discouraged to not see you pursuing that a little more aggressively, but hopefully with the CAP 2.0 analysis, that'll bubble up to be one of the highest priority things, because I'm a really strong believer that transportation, both within the city and city residents going someplace else, has got to be the biggest place we can make an impact on fuel switching. Heat pumps are interesting, and I don't really know very much about them myself, so it's good to hear the discussion. But I mean, cars are things that people turn over way faster than water heaters. So I think that's got to be something that's, and I'm sure it will be part of the CAP 2.0. So hopefully that'll be pursued. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, item 7.4, Outreach Subcommittee Update. So I know I'm on the Outreach Subcommittee. Samantha is not here. Tom and I and Samantha all met. I made a few notes, not many. And thanks to Samantha, we had kind of a summary from outreach ideas prior. So again, if you wanted to report anything, I'll just go through my list, and then you can supplement it with what you remember. So we had under outreach strategies, trying to do partnerships with other groups, attending upcoming sustainable events, and literally advertising that, hey, we're on the sustainability committee. If people are interested, they come here and present ideas. The other thing we had a question about for promoting East Bay Community Energy 100% option, so people don't opt out, or at least don't react negatively to it. I'm not really seeing yet what EBCE is going to be putting out as far as their publicizing to residential customers, how this is all happening. But maybe there can be a targeted email out to people who are on the e-blast. Is that something we can tap into and use?
Yeah, we can share with you what EBCE's plans are for outreach. We know what they've done for commercial, and they have marketing plans for residential later this year. So we can let you know what messaging they're sending out. It's maybe not aligned with what our messaging will be because of the way they describe right choice. Our way of describing it might be different. But yeah, where we can use our e-news, certainly we should to let people know that this is coming.
Yeah, and actually, to let people know that the council and the committee had worked to make the default a certain thing specifically for a reason of reducing our carbon emissions. So
We have a letter that was signed by Peggy McQuaid and Nick Pilch as the two board members of EBCE to specifically to commercial customers. So we already have some messaging that might encourage people and explain to people why we've picked this option.
Yeah, well, again, the idea is just rather than them finding out on their bill, that they would, which maybe they don't care because it's a net, it's no added cost anyway. But it's going to look different. They're going to see a separate cost from PG&E, and they may get confused and say, gee, I'm being billed something more. I don't want to do that. Whereas I'm sure there'll be flyers included that explain everything, but a lot of people just look at the bill. So we just thought it would be helpful if coming from Albany itself and the Sustainability Committee, that if there's a big emailing that goes out to as many people in Albany as possible, it would highlight that coming up. I know I get my own, I don't know if people get tailored versions of the e-blast or just everybody gets the same thing.
It's the same.
It's the same. So how would we get something on there to?
You can go through me.
Oh, okay.
But I'm planning to work with EBCE on outreach for residential, later this year.
And residential will start?
It starts launching in November, so
November, okay,
I want to check with EBCE on their timeline for outreach because they end up getting a lot of calls from confused residents.
Yeah, so I was thinking in October sometime if we could have something that just said, hey, this is coming.
Yeah, I think September and October would work.
Put a positive spin on it. So anyway, that was one thing we thought outreach-wise would be good to piggyback on and do that.
Just so you know, also, there are communities that are having workshops about EBCE. I don't have any of those dates in my head. I think Berkeley had one recently.
I saw that. Yeah, I wasn't
yeah.
able to attend.
So
Is Albany going to have any, or is it up to us to do that?
EBCE is putting them on in different communities, so I think maybe Berkeley was the North County one, but we can ask.
Yeah.
What's the content of those meetings?
I'm not sure. I think it's a kind of a venue for people to get a better sense of what EBCE provides and ask questions.
So anyway, other outreach concept was, doing some sort of poster campaign on the big belly bins that are around town, and we talked about maybe getting Albany High School group to come up with targeted messages. Could be the EBCE thing, could be something else. Samantha pointed out to us this school year's just winding down. The next one doesn't start up for a while, so this one's probably on hold. And then we also had the idea of having a large event, and Tom also brought up the idea of something like an Arts and Green Festival. If we want to partner with Parks and Rec, we better start thinking about that now. If we want to publicize more of, it's kind of chicken and egg thing, because we could put out a lot of information about Cap One, where we are, what we did, all that, or try to promote. Well, then what do you try to promote? So is it energy efficiency? Is it fuel switching? All this stuff seems to be a little suspended by wanting to get the information from the Cap 2.0 that you can then feed out to the general citizenry to tell them, here's the direction we're going and here's what we're recommending. So, but again, this idea of having a event focused on sustainability. I don't know, you want to say anything about that, or no?
No, I think we should have it on the agenda.
Well, this is just on outreach items, so we could have something on agenda later. And then talked, let's see. I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, that's just the notes I had. I don't know, did you have anything else you want to follow up with that? Yeah, it's unfortunate Samantha wasn't here because she's pretty alert during those meetings too. Okay, so there's still a lot going with outreach. Anybody have any questions regarding that or issues? None from anybody in the public want to maybe talk about ACAC and what they're up to? That would be great.
One thought on the outreach, just on the heels of the last comment from Eric, it might be worth considering putting the transportation into the outreach subcommittee, because I think, again, it is something that exists, and you can go out and lease a car, a cleaner car, electric vehicle today. And I found that a lot of people don't have, some information, like there's an information gap. And the costs have come down, and as I mentioned, the costs of operation are lower. So I think it's an opportunity, and there are plenty of people who have electric vehicles in town that could be like ambassadors or spokespeople. So it's an opportunity, I think, potentially.
Okay. I take your challenge. We'll make it the Outreach and Transportation Subcommittee, or Clean Transportation.
Then I'll add on to that a clarification, because Eric, I really appreciate your point too, and I think maybe my comment was misinterpreted. Transportation is super important. It's a big piece of the pie. Transportation is closely connected to land use and economic issues. So that's why I felt and there's so much analysis out there on what different types of measures can do and what would be applicable in Albany. So, right, the goal is not to guess at strategies here in this meeting, but to really pull the analysis in and then focus so that any outreach is properly representing what the strategies would be.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something simple like maybe in Albany, talk to an EV car owner. If you're thinking of doing it and you want to get some information, we could pull a bunch of people that have EVs together and just have a little show and tell.
Like EV peer counseling?
Yeah, kind of like, hey.
We
this
did
is how-
have an electric car show at the last few
Yeah.
Arts and Green festivals.
Yeah. We actually have one where people can understand from people other than dealers sort of what the options are. I just had a kid stranded at SFO today with my electric car, so I'm fresh from it. Okay, any other? Oh, you wanted to get up and talk about ACAC. Please do. Thank you, Eric. Almost on schedule. Yes. go.
Got it? Okay, great. So the Albany Climate Action Coalition group has been meeting pretty regularly. I'll just have to say right off the bat, Jessica Day is an amazing force in this whole thing. She has put this whole website together, and she's just amazing and has been driving the team and driving the development of this. And so it's participating members have been Jessica, myself, Preston Jordan, Tom Cooper, and Max Way. Gene Wu's been involved as well. So where we're at in our goal is to, be the communication vehicle, the grassroots communication vehicle for climate action. And so we figured the website was one of the first things we wanted to do because that's the easiest way and most powerful way to communicate. So we've got the structure set up now. This is actually a live website. We met last night, and our plan is to populate this with content. So all of us have divvied up responsibilities for different parts of the content to start contributing to the website. But I'll just give you a quick tour of it. I'll try to be brief. So the about would be just who we are and what this is about. Events, this is, as we talked about earlier, Jessica and I we have 2 talks planned, so we have those already up here, so you can get more information about where those talks are, what they are, and actually be able to register, get more information, all that kind of stuff. What you can do. And so this is probably going to be one of the core parts of this because people are always asking, how do I get involved? What can I do? And we had a good discussion last night about making sure that we tailor this for different stakeholder groups, being very sensitive to renters and elderly and homeowners and students. And there's probably different ways you can parse that out. But that coupled with the lists of things you can do, and we started brainstorming about, what's the easiest things you can do, what's the cheapest things you can do, what's the most bang for your buck you can do. So again, some of the discussion that was up here was very much in line with what we're thinking there. And it all comes back to, again, getting the right information and presenting it so that we are asking people to take action on the right things. And so our group is still coalescing and looking for, expert direction on that. So we'll keep on working with the Sustainability Committee here and getting that kind of direction, I hope so, because that's what we want and need. And we want to communicate the right things here. But one of the really cool things that Jessica already did on here is the poster idea. So there's already a poster that she designed that's available here for download on the website. So you can just download this, print it out, and put it in your window. So we're a way to advertise our new group and also to bring some recognition and some advertising to that. News would be the latest information about local, national news. So, keeping fresh content updated on a regular basis really draws people in. So this is one of those areas where we can do that. And a forum, so a structure for a forum so that people can, contribute to a discussion of some sort. And we populated it with some seeding it with some ideas on areas. Forums on websites are always tricky because you always get into that moderation question, all that kind of stuff. But we're just going to go for it and see how it goes. So, yeah, I think that gives you the basis. One idea that Jessica had that was really, I thought one of the really cool key parts of this is this host a climate action night. And so this is, you can request from our group to have an expert come to your home if you're willing to get 10 or 20 people together. And so Jessica and I will be the ones that initially will go, and we can do the abbreviated climate action talk, climate reality talk, or we can tailor it to different parts of the Albany. The talk that we're going to do in August is going to be the climate reality talk, tailored down to 10 or 15 minutes, plus local Albany action that you can take. So we're really going to try to skew it towards the local Albany action. But so the website's live. We're going to, like I said, populate it with content, and idea is to start advertising it in July and get the word out through just the regular social media and whatever methods we can use on a low budget here. I think that's it. Trying to think of what the other, so we talked about so creating content for the website, the EBCE, the last discussion you just had about, the city residents and informing them what's going on, that was definitely one of our messages we were going to build into the website here was what is EBCE, what's, then the Brilliant 100 choice and why that's a good thing. And you can even opt up to the 100% renewables. And again, having another vehicle to support that decision and make sure that we keep people in that program. So that's definitely one of the key first things we'll do. So advertise website, get the content in, the EBCE. And so we're kind of then looking for our next initiatives and what, so that'll be our next step in this group's evolution is to recruit more members, spread the workload, and figure out where we want to go with communication initiatives. So that's how it's looking at this point. Any questions?
No, but that's great to have that happening. So
Yeah.
I guess the question I would have is how do we get out to as many, is it possible to put links to this on the city webpage, or is that?
I'd like to check on
Yeah.
that. I'm not sure exactly what our practice is. It can be a touchy issue because we have to treat
Right.
everyone
Right.
equally.
And someone else will say, why don't you have our coalition link up there?
Yeah, I understand the value of that, and if we can do it, we certainly will. But
Yeah.
I just have to make sure that, there may be organizations that on other topic areas where it might not be appropriate, and we
Right.
just have to have a consistent policy.
Well, one thing I was thinking, this was really significantly endorsed by the Sustainability Committee because it's an outgrowth of a similar group that we had going at some time. So, again, if there's a way to do that, that would be really helpful. Not that the city gets this huge volume of use, but it probably, of people in Albany, probably quite a few. Is it also possible to advertise at the community center or put flyers up there or do things like that?
Again, we have the same issue with, what are we promoting, and are we promoting different organizations equally?
Yeah, okay.
So,
So the ACAC members are going to go around the city and start putting posters up. We're going to do that.
Yeah,
We're going to go like the community center, the senior
Yeah,
center,
some
the
bulletin boards and
businesses
places
in
like that,
Solano.
yeah.
We're going to just
Yeah.
go where we can and get the
Okay.
posters up. So, but certainly any support from the city would be awesome.
yeah, okay.
we'll report back to you. So you should know, we should be able to explain our practice on that, and I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll.
Yeah, and I would hope maybe if it's, the criteria is that it's non-commercial organizations, and maybe there's the appropriate disclaimer that the city is not endorsing them, that, these are outside organizations and you pursue at your own risk kind of thing.
Yeah, just one other one was the city newsletter that came up also, if there's a possibility to at least, just
You mean
announce to the community that this is a new group that has formed and this website is online. So it's just another question along same lines of questions that Nick was having.
yeah, okay. Like the e-blast, you mean, if they can be.
The
referenced.
city newsletter, yeah, just that,
Okay.
yeah, I think it's monthly.
Right, and they could do the reverse, right? On your website, say, if you want more information about this city program,
Right.
go look here.
Yeah.
Because I hear, the staff are working with EBCE on the communication strategy.
Right.
The committee here is talking about outreach. You're doing outreach. Like, there's so much work to do, so it'd be good to,
Coordinate.
coordinate,
Yeah.
divide and conquer. If somebody has one thing covered, then focus on
Yeah.
something else, yeah.
Right.
But it looks great.
I know.
And I'm interested to talk further with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started with the Sustainability Committee, I had this idea of a portal, where you go to the city website and you click on something, but, well, this could be this is a good portal in that sense. But again, with the city, it was here's the things the city's doing. But anyway, that was just a thought. So yeah, if you could get back to us on that, would be great. Any other comments on this? We just clicked over 9:30. So I think that was the last item.
Thanks.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great
Eric.
work.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear about ACAC out there doing things and getting more activity happening. That's exciting. So the last I have, if people don't mind going a little longer, we just had possible future agenda items. And I'm seeing recycling and plastic pollution, which I think we know is a critical concern, or at least we've heard concern, especially plastic straws.
I'd like to, at the July meeting, have a discussion about whether we should work on a arts and green type thing for next year. Because if we're going to have that, if we're going to do something, we need to make a decision about that.
I want to remind you that committees no longer put on events. So the Arts and Green Festival conversation needs to happen at a community member meeting. Maybe it's working with ACAC, like a community group. But the policy is that committees don't put on events. So we can't agendize it as an event that the committee puts on.
So if we wanted to, as part of outreach, if we wanted to do an event, or let's say we wanted to partner with Parks and Recs is the only group that can do events for the city, right? Is that how I'm understanding it now?
Community groups can put on events, but committees can't put on events. If you want to work with staff on putting up on a workshop, that's one thing, but a multi-vendor event gets complicated with finances, and so we can't have committees putting on events.
Or to ask it a different way, if a group like ACAC wanted to engage the city to do an event, would they, for example, go to the Parks and Rec Commission to have that agendized and discussed?
Right, yes. It's the committee, and it's the Parks and Rec Department, say you do something in Memorial Park or in the community center, that either needs to be a recreation department initiative or a nonprofit or organization that's the sponsor.
So how do we initiate that, though?
Either way, I think we talk with the recreation department staff.
So just so I mean, we can maybe put this to bed. So if the sustainability committee, as part of our mandate, we outreach to the community and we educate. If we want to do an event, we can't.
It's not in your purview.
So, okay.
Your outreach subcommittee, if you want to work on, like I said, hosting a one-time workshop or working with the ACAC group, there's some, there's something that could work there, but when we start talking about the committee sanctioning event where finances are crossing hands, that's where we have to put it off there.
What if we passed a resolution that encouraging Park and Rec to organize an event, and would that initiate Park and Rec? I'm trying to understand the mechanics of getting Park and Rec to take on something like this.
I think, we can ask the Park and Rec Department if they want to do this. But again, it seems like it's sliding into the committee sponsoring it. And we can, I feel like well, first of all, we shouldn't go too deep in this right now. We'll put it on the agenda next month. We'll have a proposal for you on how an event could start and who could sponsor it. Let's do it that way. And we'll, in the meantime, Claire and Chelsea and I will check with the Recreation Department to make sure that we're all speaking consistently.
And the policy change at some point in the past year?
Yes. Yes.
Or a policy was established?
There's been again, I think this is a separate agenda item.
Okay.
but
So we could, that would be good to include is.
It absolutely has
understand-
changed.
Understand what,
So we'll get an update on
That is-
event policy.
right.
I thought I heard something else that we wanted.
The other thing I was going to ask about agendizing is, are there any major projects coming before the city that we can review?
There, on a pre-application basis, there is a 8 or 9 unit development project that's under, I expect will be a formal application. They had a study session recently with Planning and Zoning Commission, and we can bring that to the committee. We're also beginning the process, very, very preliminary stages of negotiating an exclusive negotiation agreement for an affordable housing project. And we can bring that to the committee. Probably the 8 or 9 unit project would be ready anytime. The other one probably needs a few months.
Great. Thanks.
Would it be good to have, and maybe we put that earlier on under, I don't know if that's under announcements or announcements, communications, like we have sustainability events. Would it be good to have a line there of just in-city projects pending or something like that?
I imagine there's not enough of them.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
We need
I
to
mean,
report
just
it.
so we hit on it, so I mean, I heard Tom say it'd be nice to have something agendized for that, so I'm just trying to get it on the agenda so we don't overlook it. I mean, you can always say nothing, I mean, you know, just so long as it's there, like a tip.
You know, I don't mind giving you a report monthly on what's going on, and maybe it's including both development projects and capital improvement projects.
Yeah,
And there might, at that case, there might be enough volume of things that are worthwhile, a standing agenda item.
okay, good.
Capital improvements would also include purchases of major equipment as well, not just building projects.
Fleet,
Fleet, that's where I'm headed with that question. Yeah.
yes.
Yes, that's a good point, yeah, so maybe, Claire, if you can, I mean, I've made note under this of possible future agenda items, but if you can think of a way to put that into the agenda, I think it's under, maybe it's not an announcement, it's just a placeholder.
The way we've done it in the past is that community development brings it to our attention when there's something. But we shouldn't have to ask, so, you know, that's the way you've done it in the past. You've told us.
And that would be what our intent is. Again, for a development project, we don't really have enough, we don't have any detail about the subject areas that you're interested in. We can show you the site plan, but that's not going to tell you anything about the efficiency. So, you know, happy to share that with you so you know where we're at, but there's nothing today that would inform policy direction for the efficiency of the proposed project.
So we don't need a standing agenda item, we'll just wait for you guys to bring it up, is that what we're saying?
That would be my preference. If there was a standing agenda item, I would broaden its definition to include both development projects and capital improvement projects. And in that case, we probably could have something new on a monthly basis.
Well, why don't we try it? And then if it looks like you're, I mean, I don't want to run out your time, or would you have to make the presentation, or is it something you can hand over to?
Yeah, that would be something that I would do.
Ooh, I think we're going to run into trouble then.
No,
Probably get our hands slapped.
no.
Oh, okay.
There's a different city manager now.
Oh, okay. So, anyway, Claire, if you want to propose something on that, I think it would be good. Have it as I'll let you figure out where you put it. But that sounds good. I think all these other things we talked about. Our next meeting is Wednesday, July 18. And then August, we don't have a meeting, right? So that'll be our last one for 2 months until we meet in September. So we can adjourn. I adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
We almost stayed on time.
How much longer?